It says, "And then I went to another place, and he showed me in the west another great and high mountain of hard rock. And there was in it 4 hollow places, deep and wide and very smooth. How smooth are the hollow places, and deep and dark to look at. Then Raphael answered, one of the holy angels who was with me, and said unto me, These hollow places have been created for this very purpose, that the spirits of the souls of the dead should assemble therein, yea, that all the souls of the children of men should assemble here. And these places have been made to receive them till the day of their judgment, and till their appointed period, till the great judgment comes upon them. I saw the spirits of the children of men who were dead, and their voice went forth to heaven and made suit. And then I asked Raphael, the angel who was with me, and I said unto him, There's this spirit, who is it whose voice goes forth and maketh suit? And he answered me, saying, This is the spirit which went forth from Abel, whom his brother Cain slew. And he makes his suit against him till his seed is destroyed from the face of the earth, and his seed is annihilated from amongst the seed of men. Then I asked regarding it, and regarding all the hollow places, why is one separated from the other? And he answered me, and he said unto me, These 3 have been made, that the spirits of the dead might be separated. And such a division has been made for the spirits of the righteous, in which there are as the bright spring of water. And such has been made for sinners when they die, and are buried in the earth, and judgment has not been executed on them in their lifetime. Here their spirits shall be set apart in this great pain, till the great day of judgment and punishment and torment of those who curse forever, and retribution for their spirits. There he shall bind them forever. And such a division has been made for the spirits of those who make their suit, who make disclosures concerning their destruction, when they were slain in the days of the sinners. Such has been made for the spirits of men who were not righteous, but sinners, who were complete in transgression. And of the transgressors they shall be companions. But their spirits shall not be slain in the day of judgment, nor shall they be raised from thence. Then I blessed the Lord of glory, and said, Blessed be my Lord, the Lord of righteousness, who ruleth forever. Okay, Ken, we got some fun stuff to break down on this one.
We sure do, Sean. And before we pretty much go verse for verse on this and refer to other texts, one little interesting thing that I wanted to point out is that the angel Raphael, who brought Enoch to Sheol here, we're told in chapter 20 that Raphael is one of the holy angels who watches over the spirits of men. And if you pay close attention, when Enoch is shown different compartments and different, places where he ends up going, the angel that shows him is always usually in reference to what they watch over. So Uriel, we are told in the previous chapter that he went to essentially Tartarus, right? And when we go to chapter 20, it says Uriel, one of the holy angels who is over the world and over Tartarus. So he's being shown all these different places according to what angel is watching over. You know what I mean? So Raphael seems to be over the spirits of men according to chapter 20 here. And so he gets the right to take Enoch to that place because he's the one who watches over it, and he can answer the questions that Enoch may have, right?
Yeah, it's take Enoch to work day, and we've got Raphael at his job taking Enoch to his job and showing him around, right. And that's just like Uriel took him around different places that he was responsible for. So I think this is fascinating that the text is just staying consistent within what it's already claimed.
That's right.
So, but verse 1 talks about going to another place. So he's moved from these places in chapter 21 that were chaotic and, horrible. And so he went to another place where there's a great and high mountain of hard rock. And there was in it, inside what seems to be, and Ken, in verse 2, it seems to say that inside the mountain were hollow places, deep, wide, and very smooth.
Yes, 4 of them. Yeah.
4 of them, yeah. So everything that we're about to read is taking place inside of a mountain.
That's what it seems like, Sean. Yep.
That's pretty wild. It reminds me of Lord of the Rings, yeah, man, where Gandalf is falling through, fighting that demon, and he's falling through the mountain and going to Middle Earth or whatever. Yeah.
Was it the Mines of Moria? Is that what it is?
Yeah, he was trying to get out of the Mines of Moria, and Gandalf stays back to fight that demon. And
and he goes deeper, right, to where the demon. Yes.
Yeah, he goes deep down into the mountain itself.
Right. I know in Jubilees it talks about that on day 1, all the abysses within the earth were created, and so
that's true.
Sheol is also a reference to the pit and the abyss, and so Yeah, I believe obviously Yahweh created this place with intention, right? And
Yeah.
it looks the way it is, and it's described the way it's described intentionally.
Yeah,
So
usually when you dig a pit, it's dug with intention. It's not just a pit that just was from natural formation. But of course, we have the parable of the vineyard owner, and where he planted a garden and dug a pit, right, for the wine press, or a vat, I should say, underneath, which is like a small pit. In the analogy, when you do a wine press, the vat or the pit will collect the actual grape juice that you would then turn into wine that's been pressed out. But in this case, it's collecting the spirits that have been pressed out of the grapes of our body. And so which
interesting.
to me reminds me of all those allusions to how the blood cries out from the ground, how the earth is defiled with the blood of sinners, that kind of thing, and how it has to be restored and renewed. And that's why eventually Sheol itself is brought before the Father and eradicated, this whole concept that we're about to read about.
Yeah.
So, and
So speaking of parables, Sean, isn't there another parable that might correlate with this entire chapter 22 here that we have in the Gospels?
yeah, it's the famous parable that Jesus talks about in Luke 16, where he talks about the rich man who basically sees and interacts, well, doesn't interact with, but he sees Lazarus, or a guy named Lazarus. I don't know if it's the same Lazarus that we see in other parts, like in John 11 and other things, that he rose from the dead, but it doesn't really distinguish. But in the parable, there's a rich man who does not have a name, and then we get a poor man who's named Lazarus. And they're
Yeah,
both in a setting that, to me, Ken, the setting that they're put in matches this description of Sheol just about perfectly.
I agree, man. I'm just going to quickly read Luke 16, 19 to 30 real quick there, buddy, just for our
Yeah.
audience's sake.
Okay.
So now there was a rich man, and he habitually dressed in purple and fine linen, joyously living in splendor every day. And a poor man named Lazarus was laid at his gate, covered with sores, and longing to be fed with the crumbs which were falling from the rich man's table. Besides, even the dogs were coming and licking his sores. Now the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom, and the rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, or which is the Greek equivalent to the Hebrew Sheol, he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus so that he may dip the tip of his finger in water, which I think we just talked about a pool of water, didn't we, Sean?
I believe so.
Yeah.
A bright spring, but
Yeah. Dip the tip of his finger in water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your life you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. But now he is being comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you there is a great chasm fixed, so that those who wish to come over from here to you will not be able, and that none may cross over from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, that you send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers. And it just goes on, and he says, essentially, if you're not going to believe this, then you have Moses and the prophets. And what I'm getting at here, Sean, this just sounds like what we're reading here in Enoch 22. You have a chasm fixed between the two. You have a pool of water or spring of water of some sort. And just the concept of being split in two, right? You have someone who is righteous, like Lazarus in this parable, and you have someone who is unrighteous, like the rich man.
That's right. And we have in verse 8 of Enoch 22:8 is where it says, Enoch is asking, why is one separated from the other? And verse 9, Raphael answers him, and it says that they've been made that the spirits of the dead might be separated. Such a division has been made for the spirits of the righteous, in which there are as the bright spring of water. So there we get the water mention. Yeah. Okay, as far as that. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's also another mention in the Apocalypse of Baruch about something like this too, right?
Yes, I believe there is. Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea of, I just want to make a quick aside for what you just read in Luke 16 and in verse 24. And when it talks about how he asks that he may dip his finger in a tip of the water so that he can, he's in agony from this flame, may touch it to his tongue. Now, because this is a parable, and many people think that they just want to brush aside all of this imagery and claim it's just a parable and none of it's real. Yet we're seeing the same type of imagery detailed to us in Enoch 22. But within the setting of this imagery and what we're about to break down in Enoch 22, I just want to go ahead and give a quick preface. there is no burning in flames. Okay. So this idea that we're looking at in Luke 16:24, if you actually break down, if you look at the Greek and what he says in this passage, where he says, I'm in agony, and some translations will say I'm in torment of this flame, or I'm suffering in this fire. And that's, just depends on your translation. But if you look, that particular word is odune, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, and pronouncing that in the Greek right, but and the definition does mean torment and pain, but if you look down, and it says it's very painful sorrow, and this is when you break into the further meanings, it means deep personal anguish expressed by great mourning. And so, and it continually refers to sorrow and pain, and that's where we get this idea of agony, like from the NAS Exhaustive Concordance. It doesn't mention a physical pain, but as much as it says mental, acute, physical, or mental pain. But the further explanation of that word and how it's used in this passage is talking about a deep personal anguish or sorrow. Okay, so the reason I say that is because some people would like to say that Jesus is expressing a Catholic version of hell, which means a place of literal people are on fire, and that is not what Scripture teaches us at all. And that's not what Enoch is expressing here in chapter 22. So this guy is asking for a drip of the water, and we see what this water is, and that's how Jesus can even mention these things, Ken. So if he's telling a parable to somebody and their audience doesn't have a clue what he's saying, that's why he's expressing them, and he can use all these terms and just keep going without even having to explain himself, because they know, in my opinion, those people back in those days knew Enoch. We see, as we've already talked about in previous episodes, how Jesus quoted from Enoch in multiple places, right? And he's teaching themes that are only found in Enoch, and there's no question or rebuttal to him after he teaches these things,
and
because they know where he's pulling this information.
Yeah, his audience, Sean, that he's speaking to in Luke 16 would be the Pharisees, right? And they believed in the resurrection. So
That's
they,
right.
they understood the concept that, there's going to be coming a day where the souls of men will come out of Sheol and take on the resurrection. So this concept isn't completely unknown to them. And, as we're talking about parables, I did a study on all the parables from Matthew to John that Yeshua uses, right? And I made notes about all the parables, and basically, it all really boils down to Yeshua's usage of words and concepts are things that are real, right? You have the sower of the seeds, you have leaven hidden in 3 measures, you have hidden treasures, you have kings and householders and laborers and fig trees and 10 virgins and kingdoms and just all these things that we know exist, right?
Right.
And he used those things that we know exist to make his point, which was the point of a parable, right? So
you're saying that he didn't just pull out of thin air an imaginary place that doesn't exist in order to put these characters in this parable.
That's what I'm trying to imply. Yes. Yeah. And nor was he using Greek mythology to drive home a truth, a point.
Right. That would be
with our Messiah's character whatsoever.
Yeah, to me, I've heard that complaint as well. That I don't know, that excuse is maybe a better way to put it. The people have tried to say that this idea of Sheol is just Greek mythology and it's not anything in the scriptures. And I laugh because I'm like, then that means that your Messiah, the great teacher, just used a horrible teaching method. And you're claiming that he's pulling from pagan sources as a description for the setting of his parable, but yet you want to say the parable setting is not real, but the moral lesson is real. And I'm like, well, why would in the world would the greatest teacher ever, who spoke nothing but truth, give us an untrue setting to a parable in which these things take place? And if you look closely, Ken, in that parable, the interaction within the parable is specific to the setting. So it's not like the setting is inconsequential.
Yeah.
The fact that the rich man couldn't get to Lazarus, and then he conceded that he couldn't get over there, so therefore he just asked for a drop of water, right? Which I think personally, if we're extrapolating meaning from that parable, that he's asking for salvation basically, because that's what the bright springs of water represent. and we get that in other places. But this idea that that's why the righteous are on that side, where it's a pleasant place, and that there is a bright spring of water because it represents the salvation leading up to the resurrection. And that's what this guy who is in emotional, deep anguish and personal torment from the flame, and the flame, Ken, is what I would suggest is going to be the second judgment, the second resurrection judgment, where all of Sheol is pulled up before before Yeshua. They're judged, they're thrown into the lake of fire, and that's what I think what we get expressed to us in verses 11 through 14.